Compass Mining is your trusted partner in Bitcoin mining. Whether you're investing in one machine or thousands, our customizable solutions are tailored to meet your needs. We are your experts in Bitcoin mining, offering a platform where individuals and businesses can purchase hardware, host machines, and access a range of ancillary Bitcoin mining services. We also specialize in large-scale site development and data center operations. Discover more at compassmining.io and see how we can power your success today. Hey miners, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. Anthony and I just wrapped up at Enterprise Day here in New York for Bitcoin Investor Week. A very full session today, hearing from some of the top experts in the industry, including 3 of the Bitcoin mining CEOs we cover on the channel. We wanted to provide an update on what we're hearing, the sentiment and the news here in New York, plus provide some coverage on the earnings and press releases in the Bitcoin mining space so far this week. Now, before we get into it, take a second, hit the like button, you guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join. And let us know in the comments section below how you're feeling about the Bitcoin mining space right now, if you've been making any purchases, and your outlook for the remainder of Q1. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay, guys, that's right. Thursday evening here. We just wrapped up at Enterprise Day. This day was focused really on the Bitcoin mining companies here in New York. We're at Bitcoin Investor Week, held by Anthony Pompliano, and really couldn't be having a better time, Anthony.
Yeah, it's been a great week so far, coming towards the end of it, but good conference today, led by Anthony Pompliano, and you had a number of key guests that we're all familiar with on the channel.
Yeah, it was great to see some friendly faces. Now, we'll start with maybe the bad news here first, Anthony. Rip the Band-Aid off. If you're paying attention to the mining sector over the past few days, obviously a lot of selling pressure. We're right in the midst of earnings season. Really some split earnings. There's been some good numbers. There's been some questionable numbers, but it doesn't quite now seem to matter what happens to the miners on an individual basis. We're really caught up in this selling pressure. So we wanted to talk about that in today's video, give you guys some reassurance of what we're hearing and seeing on the ground here in New York from some of these big investors and institutional holders. However, we'll kick it off, Anthony. Bitcoin retreating again into the $82,000 range. So hitting that kind of low point Freedom by 40 had mentioned a few weeks ago. We've bounced twice now off this $82,000 level, and the miners started off pretty positive today, but ended up majority in the red.
Yeah, and you know, we headed on down to the conference at pre-market, and the miners were in the green territory, and some were significantly up. I think Corz Scientific were up 19% based on the good news that they provided yesterday in their earnings. Bitdeer also had a 15% increase, and bear in mind that's more aligned to the fact that their stock price dropped 30% after their earnings. And no matter which miner you look for, whether your favorite or your least favorite, pick any miner. They've all been hit with the same sort of reductions in recent days. So no one's sitting pretty in this market at the moment. And any gains that people had acquired, you know, over the past couple of months there were probably wiped out in literally a couple of days of trading. So we've talked about this before. The volatility of the miners is bigger than the volatility of Bitcoin. Bitcoin, as you say, dropped to 82,000 a couple of times there. I think it's hovering around the 84,000 at the moment. So the movement's quite significant on a daily basis. We're seeing a lot of action, you know, down from 82 up to 87, back down again as well. So a lot of movement in Bitcoin price, and that means a lot of movement in the mining prices. Just when you think we're getting to the end of it, and you know, we're looking for a next step up, you know, if Bitcoin seems to sort of like fail, and the miners seem to follow suit very quickly.
Yeah, that's unfortunately how it's been going the last few weeks. And we talk about volatility extensively on the channel, but really seeing that in a big way here, as we're going to talk about in today's presentation. So we'll mix in some news, some pictures. First up here, Anthony, and actually kicking off the event this morning was Fred Thiel from Marathon. They came out with earnings this week, starting to hint at some HPC AI, which I know the market was quite excited about. Also, their cost per coin metric was fairly favorably received. He kicked off the conference today really talking about the future of HPC AI, the importance of the inferencing and some of these computations, and how Marathon's looking to position themselves moving forward. So almost a complete shift from what we've seen earlier in the year. They used the terminology strategic pause while they were waiting to evaluate how this first wave of HPC AI unfolded. But for me and you, Anthony, it was very reminiscent of that shift we've heard last year from asset light to vertically integrated, now completely focused on Bitcoin mining, purchasing Bitcoin, starting to shift over to this new strategy with some HPC AI flared in there.
Yeah, and that's been the sort of the message for the last 3 or 4 years. It seems to have been one strategy following then another strategy and then another strategy. And, Marathon Digital, have got the largest hash rate of all the Bitcoin miners. They don't tend to always operate that at the best when compared to their peer miners. We've talked about that many times on the podcast. They tend to have a good month's production, and then lo and behold, they'll have 5 or 6 months of really poor production. And so, they realized late in the game that, the purchasing of assets to host their own miners was the best way forward because of the control and the ability to curtail and keep costs down when energy prices rise was the best way of going about these things, and that seems to have picked up. So in terms of their results, and we'll cover their results more detail next week when we'll do some more comparisons. There's been so many results out this week, and we've had a conference to go to, we've had meetings to attend, so we haven't had too much time to spend digging into the miners. But overall, their cost to mine a Bitcoin had improved this last quarter compared to previous quarters, and that's probably the key metric when you look at mining companies. I put out a tweet yesterday highlighting some of the cost to mine for those miners that had already released numbers over the last few weeks. And, from all the miners up to now, the standout miner, appears to be IREN, with a fantastic just over 40,000 all-in cash cost to mine a Bitcoin. So even at today's prices, where you say the Bitcoin price is 82,000, they're still making literally a nice big margin there of over 50% on the Bitcoin price, because they're able to attract low energy prices in Childress, and they're also got the most efficient fleet. Now, Marathon equally have been improving their fleet efficiency, and I'd say, in terms of compared to their peers, they're sort of in the top four. I think IREN and CleanSpark are ahead of them, but Cipher and Marathon are both in that sort of 19 joules a terahash. And we talked about this before. Any miner that's under 20 joules is in the sort of in that category as one of the most efficient fleets. And having an efficient fleet means you're using less energy. Less energy means less cost. So your margins improve. So that fleet efficiency that they've managed to achieve, bear in mind they've added some serious hash rate over the past sort of 12 months to get to where they are. They've got over 50 exahash plugged in. A lot of that will be new machines bringing that efficiency down into the 19 range, meaning the cost to mine a Bitcoin comes down, and that's reflected in their cost to mine a Bitcoin from their results. Now, I'll be going through their numbers and just doing a little check myself, because it's great when miners put these amounts in the presentation. I look at the numbers, and sometimes there's a little bit of a discourse between what they put in their presentation and what I find out in the account. So I'll have a look at that this week and do a comparison and try and include all the big names. But one of the things that came out this morning, with what Fred was talking about and some of the other speakers as well, was the state of Bitcoin mining, in terms of the fact that, when you've got 25 to 30 public miners at the moment, all trying to make a business out of this, it's a challenge. And, we've talked about this before, but Zach Radford came out and talked about the fact that there's probably about 7 miners out there that really can do it, and the rest of them are going to just struggle because of the fact you have to raise significant amounts of capital. So if your market capital isn't particularly high, you have a challenge to raise capital to grow quickly. And we've seen some of those miners that were, potentially 18 months ago, fairly small miners. I mean, IREN's a classic example. CleanSpark, to a certain extent, is another classic example. I mean, really, they were well behind Riot and Marathon in terms of size, market cap, hash rate, literally every metric. This last 18 months, they've utilized that ATM to grow hash rate incessantly, and are both now really, tier one miners, producing significant amounts of Bitcoin. Both of them have well over 30 stroke 40 exahash, respectively, and are growing to 50 exahash by the middle of this year. Those miners that aren't in that top seven, with single digit hash rates at the moment, that's where the challenge is. How do they grow to 10? How do they grow to 20? How do they grow to 30 when it takes hundreds of millions of dollars in machines and tens of millions of dollars in facilities to build and host those machines? That's the issue. And that was what sort of like came across this morning in a couple of the discussion points.
Yeah, it certainly did. So after Fred Thiel this morning, next up was Jason Les from Riot. They've obviously just come out with earnings this week as well. We were fortunate to have Jason on the program. Unfortunately, he didn't stick around the conference too long after the speech, so we didn't get a lot of FaceTime with Jason today. However, he again talked about the importance of energy efficiency and this emerging HPC AI opportunity, as we heard on the conference call, really the focal point. And again, Anthony, quite a pivot or contrast from what the team at Riot was talking about last year at this time.
Absolutely. 8 months ago, back in Corsicana, he wouldn't even field any questions reflecting high performance computing because, Riot were building out Corsicana, with 1 gigawatt of immersion cooling technology to house all their mining fleet and had a significant hash rate target to achieve. Probably one of the largest targets of all the miners at that particular time. However, 8 months later, when we had Jason on the podcast this week, and he reiterated today, they've now seen the light a little bit with regards to HPC. I mean, nobody can forget the contract that Corz Scientific announced. And that was literally days before when Jason said they weren't pivoting towards that way. He was really trying to determine whether there was actual how much realism that contract would provide in terms of it was an unknown. It was the first big contract announced, and people were probably a little bit skeptical of of the earnings and margins that were potentially being quoted. And Corz Scientific didn't hold anything back. They put all the details out there, and the margins were literally 71% net profit for the whole contract period. Amazing. Now, when something in my from my history, when something sounds too good to be true, generally is too good to be true. But, Corz Scientific have just grown this way over that last 6 months and grown that contract to now 590 megawatts. Riot see that and they're looking to utilize, hey ho, 600 megawatts at Corsicana. So maybe they can get some sort of a similar deal in there. They're looking for a hosting deal. They've got advisors working now around the clock to determine what Corsicana can deliver, because that's important. You can't just say I've got a site, I've got some power application, I'll just put some buildings infrastructure in there and host AI. There's a lot more to it than that, and so there's a 3-month now survey being carried out at Corsicana to cover all the factors, so fiber, water. At the same time, source some sort of a client to come in and work with them to host a big service. And so there's a lot of wheels to move. But one thing I'll say about Jason when he came on the podcast, and also today, he had a very positive outlook on the way forward, in the same way that Dan Roberts also said from IREN's position as well. So I thought it was a really good presentation. He emphasized all the key points about why they were pivoting towards that way. They've not increased the hash rate growth now from getting to 38.4 later this period. All expectation now is waiting for an announcement on the HPC side.
Yeah, and it was interesting. You bring up Corz Scientific. A lot of people, Anthony, in the marketplace, and we covered this many times on the channel, were just not assigning Core the valuation we felt they were worth based on this CoreWeave contract. So as a result, some people were starting to question, even sending us questions, how sure is CoreWeave and Corz Scientific about this relationship? Is there any chance of scaling it down, pulling out, anything like we saw with Microsoft? Lo and behold, Corz Scientific, Adam Sullivan, yet again come out with an upsize on the deal. So adding an additional 70 megawatts, virtually the same agreement or contract. However, they pay the capex out of pocket for this one, about $100 million. So the real benefit there, Anthony, not so much the next 70 megawatts, which is obviously great, but in my mind, just the confidence and reassurance that CoreWeave means business. They've got the money and they want to obviously extend that relationship.
Compass Mining makes Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone. Start mining in as little as 48 hours with our turnkey hardware, online and mining directly to your Bitcoin wallet within 2 business days. Find out more at compassmining.io and get started now.
Yeah, this is another a great piece to the CoreWeave deal. Another 70 megawatts. We did know about this in December, but what we're hearing now is contracts have been signed, so it's all in place now. It looks like also that some of this actual particular expansion is going to occur in 2025, and therefore the benefit to Corz Scientific is they'll be able to apply revenues as they're received and get the full benefit of those revenues for this 70 megawatts, because on the other contract there, they're going to have to repay some of the payments they receive in advance to cover the infrastructure costs. So Corz Scientific, if you remember right, they were borrowing just over $500 million from CoreWeave, which we paid back effectively at 50% of the revenues they receive in the first couple of years to pay that back. So that, even paying back 50%, they were still making a nice margin of around 30% margin those first 2 years. And then it goes up to sort of like close to 80% for the remaining years of the contract. This extra 70 megawatts will be able to show full revenues, and that'll be great because once they're showing the revenues through the accounts, that will send a message to the market. That will enable Corz Scientific to go out there and leverage that revenue and be able to borrow against that revenue and to further expand. They've also got effectively another 300 megawatts that they're going to utilize in HPC that hasn't been assigned yet. They're looking for another client out there. And when you've got 590 megawatts for one client, it's a bit like buses. You never see one for ages. All of a sudden, 2 or 3 come together. So, it might be that Corz Scientific, start announcing more deals. Because to be honest, without the TeraWulf deal, it's only Corz Scientific at the moment. And we know there's a number of miners out there that are probably quite close to announcing something. So we just have to, wait our time, be a little bit patient, watch this space. And apparently, according to Dan, there's enough pie for everyone out there.
There certainly was. Now, speaking of food, we were able to actually catch a dinner with Tyler Page and some members of the Cipher mining team, tour of the office, which was phenomenal, right downtown here in Manhattan, and some great context into the business model, better understanding of Cipher mining itself. So again, we'll go through the earnings next week in detail, Anthony, but one thing that came up is just how these contracts actually work. Cipher obviously has deep rooted connections in Wall Street, the financial realm here. So we were able to ask Anthony, what do these contract negotiations look like? And I actually asked the question to Tyler saying, as a retail investor, we hear so much interest, attention, demand for this HPC AI access. However, we're still not seeing the contracts come through. So the question was, are these hyperscalers essentially at a disadvantage or losing ground on their competitors every day they don't sign these agreements? Tyler was able to walk us through exactly why they take so long and some of the intricacies involved in the design and execution of these contracts.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Bryce. The whole process of going through these, the teams that have to be available to sit through these discussions. We're not talking Tyler and an opposite number. We're talking teams from every department going through, looking at specifications, determining, whether a company can deliver data centers. Now, we look at the mining companies, they're, Bitcoin, most of them are Bitcoin mining. Fortunately, when you come to companies like Cipher and Corz Scientific, they've got experience in doing this. They've got data center expertise within the company. So that puts them ahead of the game in terms of, compared to peer miners. And, Cipher have got some large sites that are getting ready now to sort of like look for a deal to come forward. I think he's just like, waiting for the right time maybe to announce something. It sounds like, wheels are fairly much in motion. They got that amazing investment from SoftBank, 50 million. as a pipe investment there. That's never happened before in the Bitcoin mining space, and that created a lot of interest, especially from the other miners. I mean, end of the day, once one miner achieves something like Core Scientific, other miners are going out there and trying to do the same again. We've seen TeraWulf get their contract. Now we're looking for the next miner, and maybe we were saying last year, Cipher, Hut 8, IREN, all poised, and now we've got Riot joining the group as well, all with significant amounts of power available. Bitdeer, do not write Bitdeer off for a minute, because they've got probably more sites coming online this year than any of the miners. We're talking over a gigawatt of sites. So a lot of these big players, all these are in the big seven. We talked about the big seven who can do things. I think we're just going to be a little bit patient. Personally, I expect Cipher to be announcing something fairly soon and fairly sizable, because they have got the experience in this space.
Yeah, and another interesting discussion point there, we talked about the relative value of these contracts. So when you look at the Bitcoin mining companies, these are $1, $2, $3, $4 billion companies. You start to look at the contract value, say, of the CoreWeave deal, 10 billion plus. To Bitcoin miners and to people invested in Bitcoin mining, this is obviously the biggest contract, the most amount of money that these companies have ever seen. However, when you're talking about a hyperscaler side of the situation, multi-trillion-dollar companies, this may represent a very, very small part of their CapEx budget, their overall plan for the year. And as a result, they've got to make all that bureaucracy, all these departments, all the different individual members line up with these decisions, Anthony, which obviously are extremely complex and expensive when you're talking about tier 3 AI ready data centers. So fascinating discussion there. And as you just mentioned, Bitdeer there, Anthony, they obviously came out with earnings this week as well. We mentioned big volatility in terms of the Bitdeer share price. We had Jeff LaBerge on the channel to talk about that future vision execution in 2025. And then, of course, CleanSpark, we alluded to the CEO conversation earlier, also coming out with earnings last week as part of our analysis compared to IREN. So no shortage of numbers to crunch over the weekend here. In addition to all the earnings, though, we also received some nice press releases out of the smaller miners. DMG, Anthony, signing an MOU for a big expansion.
Yeah, that was a good piece of news today. We know they're looking to break into the high performance computing business, and they've just signed a memorandum of understanding with an undisclosed counterparty to purchase infrastructure, which is going to be a prefabricated 10 megawatt air-cooled data center known as a PDC, and it's designed to meet sensitive compartmented information facility. And these specifications are usually required for military applications. The MOU itself marks a significant step in DMG's strategy to enter this generative AI sector. They're going to conduct further due diligence over the next 3 months with plans to finalize an agreement, and they've received an upfront $5 million payment and additional payments tied to future generation AI revenue. So the PDC will serve as a foundation for general AI computing, and it will require additional power distribution, backup systems, computer hardware. And the CEO, Sheldon Bennett, who we've had on the podcast many times, and he'll be on the podcast next week, so I'm sure he'll talk a lot more about this. He highlighted that the military-grade PDC will accelerate deployment by at least a year and enhance the company's credibility in securing high-value take agreements, particularly when you're looking at the federal and enterprise clients requiring this type of SCIF compliant infrastructure. So, another way of delivering HPC. DMG again always seem to be, knocking on the door of all this sort of like latest technology. They always seem to have their fingers in every pie, and this was a good update today from them.
I thought so too. And the other one we got, great to see, an update from Soluna Holdings in relation to their project Rosa, now securing 60 acres of land, really acting as the next step in development here for this 187 megawatt campus.
Yeah. This extra 60 megawatts, which will be strategically co-located with a 240 megawatt wind farm in Texas. And this will enable the project to, harness a substantial share of its renewable energy directly. they secured the land based on a purchase agreement for the 60 acres, which are necessary to deliver this project, and an important milestone in its journey to shovel readiness. So we've talked many times about the way that Soluna go about this. They work and design these projects, and then they seek a partner to come in and help to finance and work out some sort of a profit share. One thing Soluna can do better than most companies is they've got this fantastic access to power. And we were talking to a number of miners yesterday, and Soluna's name came up in many conversations with regards to the fact that although market capitalization now, which is last time I looked was probably around about 12 million mark, they still can punch above the weight and achieve low energy costs, and some of the lowest costs in the industry at circa around the 3 cents a kilowatt hour, which puts them in terms of energy on a par with the likes of IREN and Cipher Mining, two of the lowest cost miners in the business from an energy perspective.
Yeah, interesting to see the land component here. We've started hearing more and more about this. Riot as well, talking about acquiring additional acres around these power facilities. We often think of Bitcoin as a digital currency, Anthony, high-tech industry, but this type of buildings, facility, data centers obviously take up a big footprint. And as we've heard from the miners, the more available acres you have, that expands the design options for the potential partners or customers at these locations. So adding an element of flexibility, and again, reaffirming this vision John has for the future of Soluna. So with that being said, Anthony, a lot of action this week. I'll give you an opportunity to close out. Tomorrow, we're going back down to the conference. There's some big name speakers, Senator Loomis taking the stage, more of a political feel tomorrow as opposed to the industry feel today. However, looking forward to both of them just as much.
Yeah, there'll be some good discussions tomorrow. There was some great discussions today. It was great to catch up with the likes of Jason Lares and Matthew Schultz and Zach Bradford from CleanSpark. Great to catch up with Tyler last night and Courtney, the head of IR from Cipher Mining, and a lot more people in the industry as well. So managed to grab a bite today with the IREN team and go through some of the key things they've brought up lately. We were fortunate to have Dan on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, so that's kept us up to speed. But great conference to be part of. Thanks to Anthony Pompliano for the invite to the conference, and yeah, looking forward to tomorrow and then getting back to normal business, normal podcasting, normal analysis next week.
Most definitely. And before we forget here, Anthony, we also ran into the team from Compass, had a really interesting discussion. You're obviously a major advocate of the seal miner. So you and I are putting together a little plan to maybe get a seal miner up and running under the hosting model and learn about that business as well. So more to come on that, but a great opportunity to meet and network in the industry. We'll be back here tomorrow. Thanks so much for watching.